Welcome to Afros and Audio's Black History Month interview series. My name is Talib Jasir, founder and CEO of Afros and Audio Podcast Festival and the Vanguard Podcast Network. I'm excited to spotlight 29 outstanding indie podcast creators and professionals who answered the call to be a part of this series. My guest today is Stephanie Williams. Welcome and thank you for being here. How are you?
I am good. You would think the way I'm sitting my head, I hear music in my earphones and I don't. And I'm just like, I'm so excited. How are you? I'm good.
I'm good too. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today, and we're going to jump right on up in here. All right. Stephanie, could you share with us the inspiration behind starting the Mocha Minutes podcast and how it reflects your personal journey?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I started the Mocha Minutes podcast about 8 years ago because I listened to podcasts and then I found out that I actually have an opinion about a lot of things. And so I listened to other podcasts, and one of them was The Black Guy Who Tips. And they do like a feedback show. And I think on one of the feedback shows, it's kind of like this moment I related to. Pastor is preaching on Sunday and he's talking to all of y'all, but it's driving down your street. And you're like, oh, is this for me? Rod had said, a lot of people are sending me stuff about their opinions. They're like, I'm going to tell you this right now. If you have opinions, start a podcast. And I was like, oh, is that for me? And I guess it was, because at the time, it's kind of like when you think about people starting podcasts, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to psych yourself up and self-sabotage you quickly. And then I'm looking at the podcast I listen to, and I didn't hear any like Black women being front and center, maybe co-hosts, maybe guests, but it wasn't like just totally Black women or Black women just centered. And so I was like, I kind of want to do this. But then I also didn't want to be a jerk and a pick-me-sha, because I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm allergic. I can't do that. I can't do it. Can't. So I wanted to have like basically a lot of things when it comes to my life and just life in general. Nothing is black and white. It's so much nuance. I have friends who are like, see, I can't talk to Stephanie about this because she's going to give us like, nah, girl, now we got to talk about nuance. I'm like, because the longer you live, the more you realize life is not black and white. Situations are not black and white. And sometimes your opinions can change. And so when I think about where I started with my podcast and where I am now, there's growth in me. And I always tell people, when you start a podcast, your podcast should not be the same from day one to day 875. It should, like, there has to be some growth that people hear from you, because that's a lot of life that you're living. And so with my podcast, I really, one, have listened more to other people, but also provided my opinion. And it is always interesting when people say, I'm glad you're talking about this because I never thought about it that way. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of things about, especially under our umbrella of Blackness, that people don't think about or talk about or act like it's not. Oh, I'm gonna close my eyes and it's not there. I'm like, yeah, that's not how any of this works. We're too great to just be one dimensional. Blackness is not just one thing. It's a lot of us under this umbrella. That umbrella is huge.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. And to be able to reflect all of it from a personal perspective, right? And the thing is that as you get to know more people, you become more inclusive, you allow more space for different voices, different people. And then you learn, oh, I was completely wrong about you and your experience because I never had a conversation with anyone like you and your experience. And we're all coming from our own perspectives and filters. That's how we all approach the world as individuals. And so to understand that allows that great way of life to take nothing personal. Everyone is coming from their own space, right? And their own experiences. I love that, Stephanie. That's how you approach podcasts. And that's how you approach your storytelling and people, because that's important. And that's a big part of what you do as well. So as a host who engages in nuanced and intersectional conversations, how do you navigate challenging topics, especially those that are sensitive or controversial?
Sometimes it is trial by fire, and the other times it's like, I know me. I cannot have this conversation, certain things. And there are some people who like to be the shock jocks. They want to be the next Charlemagne's. They want to have these discourses on their mics. Stephanie is not one of those people. And a lot of it is, I think sometimes people don't realize when you're a podcaster, you're a content creator, that's a lot of emotional work you're doing. So imagine you are having a tough conversation with someone who is literally diminishing and dismissing your experience to just be controversial to just get clicks and likes, to actually that's a lot of harm to your own self that you're doing. And for me, sometimes I just don't do that. And so I have had a couple of times on my podcast where I'm having a conversation with someone and I have to stare to, wait, where are you getting this from? And it's ironically, it's so funny, it's usually people who are younger than me. And it's, what are you talking about? They're like, Ritz? Oh, hon, I want to tell you a lot of things. It's circle of life for a lot of things in our community. Is, oh, no, don't do this. Don't do this with me. But the thing about it, I also, I don't like arguing on, because one, I'm like, that is not, I don't need us picking each other apart, which is why I have no problem going to maybe like a Twitter Spaces or a Clubhouse. But after a certain little amount of gender wars, I'm not doing this with you. I'm not doing Oppression Olympics. I'm not doing Jollof Rice Wars. I'm not doing this with you because no one wins when the family feuds. I'm not doing this with you. And the thing about it is, a lot of people are like, that's how I can get clicks and likes. I'm like, yeah, that may get people there, but it will not keep them if you are not interesting. If that's all it is, I'm like, okay, well, I can just go find somebody else. Because one, it's like, Talib, you're a content creator. Every content creator, you put a lot of yourself into this mic, and then you have to like basically decompress. But if you're putting all this like energy into it to argue about things or to like the controversial topics, they're hard to have. They're just hard. They're crucial conversations. Sometimes they're hard. But if someone is intentionally trying to get your goat, it's baby, yo, I'm disengaging. I cannot. And it is okay to just, oh, we don't do that here. You can go to that place, but not this place. Is protect your space and protect your spirit and protect your energy. Because there's some people who are just vampires and they want to suck it out of you. Don't let them do it.
Yeah, I hear you. And so the great thing about it, especially the podcasting platform, is that you do get to do it on your own terms.
Correct.
And you get to curate what happens on your own platform. And so it is one of those things where, and I would love for you to speak to this, when you just get into podcasting, when you want to interview people that you may admire or think are in some way someone that you aspire to being. And so you may allow for some things that you may not have expected. And so it's almost like this growing up inside of your own podcast, inside of your own art, where you're like, I tried that and it made me feel uncomfortable or made me come out of character or made me address something that I would have never addressed on my own. And giving yourself permission, right, to say, you know what, I don't want to talk about that here. That's not what this conversation's about. Or I thought you were a good guest, but now I'm realizing, and good is subjective, so I don't want to say it like that, like anybody would say that, but and maybe the interview doesn't even get released, something like that. But being able to have some autonomy and self-ownership on your platform is something that I think is really important for especially new and aspiring folks to know, but also no matter how far you are in the game.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point, because I think when you're first starting, you're very green in your mind, but everyone else is also treating like you green. But there are some people who, if you know they're established, they have a certain platform, you give them a little bit of leeway in a way that you know that you wouldn't. But then people expect it. Oh, it's this person, of course. So when I think about like when you're first starting out, you don't walk into your podcast as a fully completed house. You're basically walking in to a skeleton, because it's like, it's got to be somewhere to grow. So you can grow to curate your space. And the thing about it, sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you have a person. You can listen to someone's podcast for years, and then you're talking to them and you're like, especially when people do certain kind of podcasts. If they're only doing sports podcasts and you're talking to them about social events, and then you hear their opinion, you're like, yeah, first and last. Because it really can just be that. They're like, thing. And I'm like, yeah, we wouldn't. It's really, and the thing about it is, it's okay for you to be first and last, because for some people, they have no problem. Like, you will find people who are trying to basically sell themselves or sell their product, sell anything or content. So they're going around to everybody. And then you're like, this is the kind of podcast I have. I'm a topical podcast with social events. Okay, can I talk about my product in my book? I'm like, okay, so if you listen to my podcast, no, I'm just trying to be on every podcast I can.
Yeah, that's his own thing. That's his own thing. Absolutely.
Have you listened to this? Or if people are like, hey, can we talk about this on your podcast? Have you listened to my podcast? No, but a Black woman and it's Black History Month and I'm white and I'm listening to learn. And I'm like, girl, let me just turn off your mic right now. The thing about it is like sometimes you can look at opportunity and say, how can I use this, especially if it's someone from a bigger platform? But then look at the after of that. Are you still maintaining some sort of relationship? It could just be every so often liking each other's social media. It could be saying, hey, how you doing? Are you maintaining some sort of relationship with them? Because one, you can tell the people who just want to usually just get themselves out there because they're like building up like, hey, I'm on this podcast. There are a lot of people with pages. This is where I guested this week. This is where I'm going to be guesting this week. And you're going like, what is the end game here? Because I think starting out in my mind, I had a vision of what I wanted to do. And now that I'm like almost on year 8, I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to change it. And might still want to have nuanced conversations, but I want to dial it back to a certain thing. Kind of do where that's the thing is I'm ready to start back up my conversation series because that was the other thing. Because for me, it was like, oh, I'm a topical podcast. I'm gonna talk about 3 big topics and then I'm out. And then I was like, there are conversations that we need to have based on social media stuff. As much as people like you see everything, not really, because your social media is curated, whether you realize that or not. Because a lot of people are like, oh, if you only follow certain people, that's curating your space. That's not showing everything. That's why people get very disenfranchised around voting years because they're like, why do people that's not on Twitter think about this? I'm like, you have to understand you're curating your space. You are seeing a small little sample size of what people really think. And you might have to talk to people who do not sit on their phone and tweet and do social media because you'll be like, wow, I didn't even know those people. I'm like, that's because you got to get out and touch some grass and drink some water and smell the air. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. First of all, congratulations for being in your 8th year. That is
thank you.
amazing. And I'm glad that you're still in the space of progression and saying,
Yeah.
okay, did that, don't want to do that no more, want to go back to this or want to do something new. And that is your prerogative. Right. And I
Correct.
think that we talk about pod fade in a way of just people getting tired of their podcasts or what have you, but understanding that it is your prerogative, your platform to change it whenever you
Yeah.
want. And your listeners have already chosen you. They might have chose the theme and the topic, but they've also chosen you. And so I think that's very important for people to understand. So congratulations to you for understanding that and continue to grow inside of your podcast.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the importance of not centering yourself when bringing light to communities within our broader communities. Can you elaborate on the approach and its significance in podcasting?
I don't want to sound funny. I felt shady about to say this. Please don't act like white people who discover things, Christopher Columbus an issue, and then put themselves in center. No, you could literally talk about Black trans women being killed and mention Black trans women that you should listen to. You can talk about trans issue and talk about trans people that you should listen to. If it is not part of your demo, and of course we're talking about the demo Black, but let's be very clear. Me as a biological Black woman, I have a different walk than a trans Black woman. So if you really want to understand their walk, listen to them. I have no problem. It's like the thing about it is I think if you bring light to something, you don't have to be in the center. I'm just a vessel. I am not the person that you should be listening to. You want to know why I know stuff? Because I listen to this person. I listen to a Diamond Styles. I listen to an Angelica Ross. I listen to a T.S. Madison. I listen to a Hope Giselle. And then they have other people that they have listened to. It's like the thing about it is, it's kind of like you have to be able to, like weird to say, as a podcaster, you speak, but you also have to be able to listen. And if you really want to learn, a lot of times it is shutting up and just listening. Because for some people, it is so hard to not be the patron saint of a current event or something going on in our community. I'm like, it's so hard for people to not do that. Because one, sometimes if you are more palatable to certain people, then they'll big you up and not the people that you're fighting for. Hence why I have no problem being on the soapbox about this. Why you'll see a lot of activists in big spaces may either be male or lighter skin. They're like, why is that? Because for some people, it's a little bit more palatable. Y'all didn't notice that?
No, understandable. And what I love about what you're highlighting here is something that I truly believe, and which is why you see Afros and audio being as inclusive as it is. One is that's my own lived experience,
Yeah.
is that, right? Being able to not be selective in life and allow people, whoever they are, because we all do the same 11 things every day. And then the other stuff is the other stuff, right? We all
Right.
get up, go to
Right.
sleep, brush our teeth, hopefully,
Mhm.
wash our face, hopefully, use bathroom, all of that. So it's like we're all
Mhm.
human beings. And so this other stuff that we fixate on is
Mhm.
about 10% of what anybody else's life is, but you're
Right.
fixated on that part. And so what I love about what you're saying is that the opportunity to listen to people in order to
Mhm.
understand someone else's experience, because if you don't have the experience, then how would you understand
Yeah.
it? How would you know it? And no one's expecting you to. But it's
Yeah.
one thing to be ignorant, it's the other thing to remain ignorant. And so I love that. I love that you do that and you allow space for that on your podcast.
Yeah, because I think the problem is that so many people in our community who do this work, people who do activist works, please know they are trying to not grow weary in well doing. And a lot of it does not get the space or the opportunity or the likes or the monetary things that should come with it with doing this work. It's not there. And believe me, a lot of them are doing it because they really care about the community. And then also there are people who come in and who will be opportunists. And the bad part about it is sometimes you don't realize they're opportunists until it's like the 11th hour and things are already in motion. And that's unfortunate. So then people get jaded. They're like, I mean, are you really interested in this? Or is it like, wait a minute, what? Oh, let's talk about Black trans women. Oh, because it's June. It's like, when are you asking me about Black History Month? Oh, it's February. I would love to have you on my podcast because I'm Black. Oh, I want to have you on my podcast. Oh, because it's March. What are you
Yeah.
doing here? And when you're first starting out, that is a muscle that you have to train. You don't know it because it's like you're just trying to get one more comfortable in the microphone. And I think we don't talk about that. It's like a lot of people, like when you're first starting out, you want to do a lot of different things because you want to, one, develop your voice, develop the muscle, get more comfortable being on a mic, being on the screen, just like this. So to a certain extent, I get that because I kind of did that too, but also kind of was like, I mean, why would anybody want to hear me? But it takes experience because then you can actually figure it out. And sometimes people who want to work with you may not be telling you the whole story. And heaven forbid you get DM on someone like, why are you working with this person? I'm like, wait, tell them out. What do you know about this person?
Yeah.
Oh,
To be more discerning and recognize that every opportunity isn't an opportunity. That's something that you learn as you go. So, yeah, it is important for people, especially people who are in the space of discovering their voice, right? Because that's a
yeah.
thing in our community a lot is that self doubt, that imposter syndrome, that need for perfection. That all comes from our socialization. And it is important to begin to at least pay attention to how you
Yeah.
feel, pay attention to what feels good, what doesn't feel good. Do more of that, do less of this. Learning that in
Mhm.
the process of discovering your voice is what it's all about. But that's a process. And the only way you
Yeah.
get through that process is to start it. So
Yeah.
get into it. It's important that we do get on the mic, pay attention while you're on there
Correct.
and do what you need to do. So thank
Right.
you for that. Absolutely.
Because it's like
So I,
making mistakes. Make
yeah,
it's like that's what, I think people are so scared. Like, I make a mistake, will I be canceled forever? Canceling is not a real thing. And when we stole it from the queer community, and please understand, canceling somebody was an individual thing. It wasn't as a group. They're like, oh no, I'm canceling you from me. But everybody's like, oh, nobody ever gets canceled. Sometimes you have to be sat down when you make a mistake. And it's okay, make mistakes, get messy, but learn from it and grow from it. That's the part that I think people don't talk about when they talk about cancel culture. That's not a thing. What is a thing is not being accountable for your actions and saying, hey, I want to learn and grow, and actually learning and growing. You got to do both.
yeah, absolutely. I can't stand a damn apology when you just said that out your mouth hour and a half ago. Like you meant it. Shut up. I don't want to hear your apology.
Okay,
Let's keep on this. But you get to grow. But
but
if
you
you
know what
said it,
gets
stand on
me
it.
to live? Something that has been, I'm like, and I'm like, why does this bother me so much? When people apologize and say, I'm so sorry, that wasn't my intention. Time out, homeboy. What was your intention? Saying you're sorry because it wasn't your intention does not really own that you just did harm. It's kind of like intention has nothing to do with it, whether you intended to or not, you still offended or harmed someone. You don't need an intent because one, that says a lot about you. Wait, what was your intention actually? Because heaven forbid you had malicious intent, it would be worse. It's okay to just say, hey, I'm so sorry that I did this to you. I'm so sorry that I harmed you. That's it.
I understand that. So I remember at one of the Afros and Audio conferences, you discussed the concept of shaking the table. In your view, what role do podcasters play in shaping public discourse?
Being prepared for the backlash when people don't agree with you. Because the thing about it is, like, one, a lot of people, I said what I said it with my chest. Be prepared for pushback. Because somebody could just go, you know what, I don't like what you said, change it. And you change it. I'm like, so did you say what you said, or did you say it with your chest? It sounds like you said it with your shoulder blade. You ain't saying it with your chest. So if you were going to have the platform, stand up in it. I feel like this is an asterisk. If you're saying stuff that's ashy, I suggest you don't. But if you're ready to shake the table, be ready for pushback or people saying, I don't think you have the whole concept of this. Let me help you. And then when you get additional information, be prepared to say, I said this on Monday. It's now Thursday, and I've talked to some people. I'm going to have to amend what I said on Monday. It's okay. The thing about it is you cannot be above a reproach. Because one, whether you are absolutely right in what you said, trans women are women, be prepared. I don't believe that. Okay, that's fine. I still believe that, but just be prepared. Because one, everybody's not going to agree with you. There's nobody on this planet that everybody agrees with. Be prepared for that. Because one, you're going to get pushback, whether like some people who literally are just trolls, like, I'm just disagree with you because I'm a troll and I'm going to do that. I'm
Yeah.
like,
No, it's then that's the
under your
thing. That's the
bridge.
thing. Yeah. I saw this great video. It was a comedic video, but it was this man just sitting in his room with about 7 laptops, and he's just trolling on each of them. And he writes and he reads out, "That was racist." He's, yes, it was. And then he goes to the next one. It's like there are people out here just doing things just to be doing things, and your blood pressure will be a lot lower if you shut out the noise. So yeah, respect. So you emphasize the importance of doing research on potential guests to ensure alignment with your platform's principles.
Yes.
What criteria do you use to select your guests, and how do you prepare for those interviews?
Ooh. So I think two things. So first, it depends if I'm doing an interview or if we're just like, hey, come on a play and we're going to discuss some topics. Because one, I'll kind of look at their social media first. Sometimes I kind of peruse to see who they're following. And I know people are like, don't look at my likes. I kind of look at them because I want to see what's going to happen. Because the thing about it is I can have lists of topics I want to cover, but I like having discourse. I'm like, oh, I can change to a different topic so we don't have to talk about this. But honestly, it really is one, listening to what maybe they talk about on their pod, but also look at their social media and what they enjoy. Because one is, I don't want experience on my platform to be uncomfortable for them either. It's not just about my comfort, it's about theirs. Because they were like, oh Lord, I gotta come on here with this black woman. She talking about care about other black women. I'm like, yeah, that's what we always do. But yeah, if I'm having an interview, looking at your stuff, I'm like looking at how you're seen. Because I got questions about what you said about this. Not in a way of I want to stick it to you, but it's you said this on a one day and it touched me and it helped me get through a week. And I just want to let you know that. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah, I do. Or if it's just we're talking about a subject, if we like the same shows, oh, we're gonna have fun because we're gonna unpack all of this. Yes, please, let's do.
Can you talk about the difference? And you made a distinction there, which I loved, about having conversations and doing an interview, because it's still a guest, right? It's still a guest who's coming on. And so what for you is, I mean, it seems a bit obvious, but there is an intentionality in that approach,
Yeah.
right? In that we're just going to have a discussion here. I'm not here to ask you question after question.
Yeah.
Do you prefer that approach, the discussion versus interview? What's that about for you?
I think for me, because traditionally, like on my show, I really have more conversations than interviews. So conversations are more my thing. But I also, and this is me, and I picked this up from a very good podcaster I know by the name of Ashani, of basically doing show notes and giving a person before we sit down, I'm like, this is what we're going to discuss. Because I also want to give them the option of, oh, I don't know too much about that. So I think prepping for what you want to talk about and just giving them a heads up, because I don't like playing the okey doke on anybody. This is not the Breakfast Club. I'm not okey doking anyone. But if I'm doing an interview, for me, because it's not interview style, is not for me. I'm like, I have no problem doing an interview, but I just traditionally don't. For me, I write out my own questions that I really want to ask the person, but I ask questions that I know will not just be yes or no or A, B, C, D. It's like, I'm asking this question because I want to see if we can open up the conversation. Because sometimes you can ask questions and it could fold into a conversation as opposed to just answering a question, kind of like we are right now. Because it is a conversation, but it really is an interview. It's both. So you have a great style of just, I'm asking a question to basically open up the fan, and so we can have a conversation. So it's kind of like you have to, one, actually do your due diligence and actually watch how people interact on social media and on their podcast. Because some people, they're like, I love doing my podcast live. There are other people like, I would never do a live podcast. I will never hit that live button where you see me on YouTube or Facebook Live. Absolutely not. I gotta record it. Somebody gotta edit it. Somebody gotta listen to it.
Yeah, that's funny because there is a lot of aversion to watching ourselves back, right? Or listening to ourselves back. I used to have a big problem with that. I'm like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to know it. I don't want to hear it. But that was, again, process.
I'm like, I recorded it. I was there in the moment. It sounded like Heavenly from Married to Medicine. I was there. I don't need to watch it back. I don't need to listen because I'm kind of like that too. Sometimes I'll listen to episodes and I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, what? This is not my podcast. Sometimes it throws you off. But it's like, that's the one thing about a lot of podcasters know. A lot of us, like, we don't listen to ourselves, our own stuff. It's so funny. I'm like, okay, so I'm not a weirdo.
Yeah, and then there's the other extreme where somebody loves to watch, to listen, and they're just cracking themselves up. And yeah, and it's like watching it like it's a whole nother person on
like,
the screen.
bye.
Yeah, it's hilarious. But I think that has to do with astrology signs too. There's certain of us that like to do stuff and certain of us that don't.
I saw your interview with Wise and I was like, I forgot me and Wise are both Leo. That's my boy. He is so funny. I love it. I'm like, yep. Usually you can suss it out with your own astrological sign because you know how y'all move.
Yeah, and I'm a Scorpio. I'd rather not, but I will when I have to.
I totally get it. Skills are
Yeah,
very interesting.
absolutely. And I will step up to the occasion, but I will avoid the occasion at all costs. That's me. And hopefully I'm not alone in that Scorpio way of being.
My dad was like that too. I'm not gonna get in the mess. If I do get in the mess, it's a problem.
Yeah. All right. So your podcast covers a range of topics, entertainment, news, all of that. How do you ensure that your content remains relevant and engaging for your audience?
I always pick stuff that I know I want to talk about. And I think that's the other thing about a podcast that does current events. Understand there's at least 20 other podcasts that are literally, if especially is current, because I know there's a lot of people talking about Megan versus Nikki right now. Everybody's talking about that. The people who listen to you, they listen to how you are going to talk about this. But it really is basically me. Sometimes I have to dwindle it down. I'm like, I have 20 things I want to talk about. But then I'm like, yeah, I only got time for 15 or 10. Because one is I could talk about this forever. But it's kind of like some things, even though I'm passionate about a lot of things, you realize sometimes you have to weigh your words and weigh your time. Because putting in a lot of information about your podcast, that is great. But then if you're like, I got to talk about everything that's hot right now, a lot of times what I find about current events, sometimes stuff will come out on Tuesday and by Thursday, it's literally a whole different story. Yeah, let it simmer. Let it rest for a little while on the slab before you come and talk about it. So I think that is something that I learned as a podcaster. It's like I could talk about this hotness right now, and then 3 days after it, it's a whole different story. You're like, now my information sounds outdated.
Yeah, that's funny because what's coming to mind is when Snoop said he was going to stop smoking, and then it turns out it was an ad. Right? And it's funny, right? And it was intended and intentional. But that will be an instance where you didn't wait for the other shoe to drop, right? This whole and Breakfast Club thing that just occurred yesterday, I guess. I'm a person who reads headlines, but I don't click most times. And then I don't repeat it. I'm not going to then pretend like I know what the article said when I know damn well I didn't read it. And so not caring about things helps. But I saw it and I heard all the discourse before and all the stuff. Right. And then they're coming out like Fuja. And I'm like, I guess for people who care.
Like, it's not April. I'm like, is this an April Fool's joke?
Yeah, and it still just seems, I mean, I'm left with just, it's odd. So that's what I'm left with. But again, I'm a Scorpio. I think critically. And so I'm going to always be like,
it's like, you're like, this is some weirdo stuff.
Yeah. But the other piece to that, as we said before, is that it is the prerogative, right, of all of these folks to do whatever the hell they want. And then it's the listeners or the audience prerogative to say, I don't want to engage in that. I don't want to know that. I don't give a two
Yeah.
cents about it, or this bothers me or what have you, and
Mm-hmm.
click X. That's the other piece on it. So
Yeah.
you want the space for all of it. Well, at least I do. I'm in the podcast
Mm-hmm.
business for all, right? So I
Right.
want to see it all. I want to know what
Yeah.
people are thinking if I
Mm-hmm.
care enough to know what they're thinking. But if
Mm-hmm.
I don't care, there's other people who are their audience and they're going to
And I'm not
listen.
seeking them out. Because the thing about it, I think a good tip for folks to do, if you're talking about something that is hot off the presses, you can actually say the date, like, this is the date and the day and the time that I'm like, this is as of this date. That actually helps you when your listeners like, well, I mean, this was recorded on this date before this happened. You can actually kind of just do that and give that disclaimer. It's a disclaimer, it's a wild one to some people. But if you're recording on a Thursday and updates are done on Sunday and your episode drops on a Monday, yeah, hi. Just say, as of today's recording, we are recording on Christmas Eve. Just give the people that heads up. They're like, oh yeah, because stuff happened after.
That's a really good tip for people who are interested in uh, current affairs, pop culture, because pop
Mm-hmm.
culture, what we just gave
It changes
examples
so quick.
of how much, and now it seems that this is going to be a thing, right? This whole
Mm-hmm.
clickbait and this whole bait and switch. This is a way of marketing, I guess, at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to become a part of it. We have folks like us who have been around for a while. So some things
Mm-hmm.
don't work for us, and some things that we see, we're like, I would rather it if we went back to the other way of doing it. But there are
Right.
people who are new, who are experiencing it for the first time, and it becomes the way to do it in a way,
Mm-hmm.
right? If they're just starting and what have you. So it all matters. There's a place for all of this
Yeah.
because there's someone out there who rocks with it. My wife
Right.
says there's a lid for every pot, right?
It
She's
really,
right. It really
you
is.
you can imagine. A lot of people like this. I'm like, it just isn't my thing. I'm not gonna yuck your yum. Okay. I'm
Yeah,
not.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because the things that we believe and think, there's someone out
Mm-hmm.
there who doesn't rock with that. So it's space for it all. So could you share, and I know you've had 8 seasons, again, congratulations. So this might be hard. This might be hard, but
Ooh,
let's see. Could you share a memorable episode of Mocha Minutes and what made it stand out for you?
ooh, oh my goodness. Several ones. And it's so funny. Some of them are kind of like from early on, but I think the first time I had my mother on the podcast with me. Now, one, for me, my mother is my hero. She still is. So she was so nervous and she wanted to do well for me. I want to make sure because it's really well. It's really good. It's really good. And so she was so nervous. And it was good to just have a conversation with her. I think the other memorable one is the first time I had Diamond Styles on my show. Now, mind you, I discovered Marsha's Plate because I watched Pose and I was looking for recaps. I'm like, oh, this show is so good. And then I found Marsha's Plate. And then Diamond would talk about her experience. And there were two other hosts. There's two new hosts now, but it was Mia Mix and it was Z. And it was great because it was two trans women and a trans man. And it was like, I loved it because it's like, you don't see at the time, and I know it's not the same like now, but like all times you didn't hear a lot of trans men speaking because they're like, oh, it's trans people, so it's just women. I'm like, they're trans men. So that's crazy to me that we did not think that it wouldn't be there. But it was great to have a conversation with her because Diamond didn't have to come to my podcast. It was still relatively new. And the fact that she just says yes. So every time I see her at Afros and Audios, it's always just a beautiful time. She is the reason why I'm like stuck on white cheddar Cheez-Its is because of Diamond Styles from Marsha's Plate. But I think we had a conversation about for trans women and I guess women in general being called female versus woman and why she prefers woman. But I'm also someone that's please do not call me a female. I'm like female's an adjective. I'm not doing this today. I can't do it. But having those kind of conversations, it was just like, it was so great. And also having Rod and Karen from the Black Island Tips on my podcast. For me, it was, you're the reason why I'm here. Not like the whole reason, but if I had not heard that one episode, I don't think I would have started a podcast. And I'm like, you're the reason why I'm here. And the fact that they said yes, I think for me, the most memorable things is having people who are my heroes or who have inspired me to be on my podcast. That's where I'm like, I cannot believe you're here. OMG, OMG, how did this happen? Those are just like pieces that are special.
Thank you. And no, those sound like some awesome episodes. Yeah, the Black Guy Who Tips. I've heard a lot about their show, and for you to have that full circle moment is really cool. that
It's
you were
like,
able to
oh,
have
and they
that.
said, so they're the reason why I have a snowball microphone, because my mic had broke and I literally drove to the store to get it, and it happened to be on sale and had to get it. So now every time people are like, what's your first mic? The little snowball. I'm like, okay, I'm in Snowball Hive too. That thing saved my life.
Nice. How has hosting Mocha Minutes impacted your personal and professional life, especially in terms of confidence and community engagement?
It has helped me be more confident in my voice. It has actually helped me learn to weigh my words, because as a Black woman, I know that my anger will never be seen as righteous to anyone outside and inside of our community. Where someone's like, that, we just need you to be quiet. I'm like, you're not going to get quiet. But also understanding there's nothing wrong with being assertive if you have something to say. And that took a minute, because there is this fear, because this is something that I've dealt with basically my whole life, where I was a people, I have no problem saying I was a doormat. And I felt like I had to keep quiet, because if I keep quiet, that means people will like me and they will not hate me. And having a therapist has helped me realize, because she gave me a sentence that I stick with. If you express how you feel, what do you think is going to happen? And like, they won't like me. And she's okay, then what's going to happen? Because it turns from, I want them to like me, to I want me to like me. I need to like wake up and look at myself in the mirror. And it's like, I have to like me. And I do like myself a lot. I like my voice and I like saying things, but it takes a while. So I don't want people who are starting podcasts thinking like it's microwave. It's like, we're so microwave on everything. Please understand, developing your voice is not a microwave thing. If you're like, I'm gonna start out hot, I'm like, yeah, you'll be ice cold by the end of your first year. You got to give yourself time to grow, because you're going to need some time. And I do bring that into my professional life. I'm a corporate Black Barbie girl. And so I get it. So it's kind of like, I always joke, I'm going to send an email, but understand that email has been edited 6 different times, because I know the audience that I'm talking to. I know how to navigate this space and I understand how to move, but it also helps me just saying things out and getting things off of your chest. Sometimes you have to just stop holding it in, because you're afraid you're going to isolate people. Sometimes those people don't need to be around you. And sometimes you got to find a way to get them out of there.
Absolutely. I'd rather folks like me because they know what they liking than liking me and they don't have no clue. All right. So, based on your experience, what is one crucial piece of advice you would offer to other podcast hosts or audio professionals, especially those starting their journey?
Start. Stop waiting for perfection. Stop waiting for the best time. Stop waiting for the sale of different podcast equipment. Start. Stop psyching yourself out and thinking you got to have the perfect situation. You got to go get a studio. You got to get the equipment. There are people who started with the earbuds from their iPhone. Stop psyching yourself out, because the thing about it is, the world's going to psych us out anyway. You psyching your own self out does not help. And it's going to feel like you are yelling out into the void until somebody at a podcast festival where you're getting happy hours. Wait, hold up, what? That happened to me in Atlanta. I went to a podcast festival. Someone was like, oh.
When you say that, whatever you're saying there is going completely out. So say that one
Oh,
more time in
oh,
the
I'm
mic.
sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no
probably
problem.
because I went too loud. So
Okay.
that actually happened to me. I was at a podcast festival. It was a networking event. And so the person said, hey, what did you name your podcast? Because she told me hers. And I said, Mocha Minutes. And she looked at me and said, I love your podcast. I listen all the time. And I went, you do? And she's like, yes, all the time. I love your podcast. You will be so surprised. The people who listen, because people who like podcasts, they listen. They find everybody. I'm like, oh, wait, you're. And mind you, I should have recognized your voice because I listen. Oh, I feel special. Because you just never know. And those instances for people who are starting, it's going to feel so good. But also, don't think that if you don't hear that, that your stuff is not good and your voice is not important. Because if you're just, I want people to celebrate my voice, then maybe you shouldn't be a podcaster. You just shouldn't. I just want like fame and fortune and notoriety. And then maybe this is not for you. Because a lot of people who start out with podcasts, they know. I felt like this was just This is my diary. This is my therapy. That's why I'm on the mic. And I'm just letting you in on a conversation. Some of the best podcasts to me that I've loved, it just sounds like I'm listening in on somebody's conversation. Oh gosh, I get to hear this? Y'all letting us hear this? I love it. Baby, do this for you.
Yeah,
Don't wait for
first.
do not wait for like a ticker tape parade or flowers before you're like, oh, I'm like, that's all I want. Then podcasting may not be for you.
Yeah, because and that will come, but only if you are doing it in a way that's genuine and putting yourself
Yeah.
first. The audience that wants you will find you as you are, right?
Yeah.
The representative is never in relationships, in life, in podcasting, the representative is not sustainable.
No.
At
No.
some point, the real you is going to show up because
Yeah.
it's you. And then you're going to have to confront that. And so being willing to be whatever you are and whoever you are and however you are
Mm-hmm.
is the best strategy for success and your own measurement of success, not
Yes.
external measurements. So, yeah, I love that you provided that insight. This is my last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, my second to last, because I'm going to ask you to tell people how to find you. But as we celebrate Black History Month, as you reflect on any historical or contemporary figures who have influenced your approach to podcasting and your broader worldview?
This is going to sound so weird, but Gayle King. A lot of people probably don't think of her as historical, but I just love her demeanor when she is interviewing or even a guest. I just watched her on The Pivot. When I tell you, if you could have told me that was investigative journalist Gayle King and not just like cousin Gayle, I'm like, no, that can't be. I think watching her and a Tamron Hall and how they navigate interviews, for me, that's just, you don't have to not be yourself. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about it. These women are themselves and they're still getting information. And also, you cannot treat them like they're boo boo the fool. If they hear something like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. And the fact that they are confident enough to say, wait a minute, to what you just said, because that doesn't make sense to me. Actually realizing like that means they're listening. So that is something that I just kind of love watching, like the Black women that I see, the Tamron Halls, even Jennifer Hudson, and I adore her. I've loved her since American Idol. I like her style too, whereas it's welcoming. I think that's the other thing. It's kind of like watching these women. Sometimes they're like, I'm here to have a hard conversation, but you don't feel uncomfortable having it because they still want it to be a welcome space. And I never want anybody to be unwelcome when they come to Mocha Minutes. If there's someone who said, I felt unwelcome, please point them in my direction. But just that warmness that Black women give, that I get from other Black women, I want to extend that. So they're the ones that just, I don't know what it is about Gayle King. I'm like, gosh, she seems like one of my aunts, or don't call her auntie, but she just reminds me of one of the women that I've been around that create space that is warm and welcoming.
Mm, nice. All right. Well, I'm glad to be the first person to ask you that question.
Yeah, I was like,
Um,
ooh.
all right. So, first of all, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We haven't had this type of conversation
Yeah.
since I met you in 2019 at the first Afros and
Oh my
Audio
gosh.
conference. So, like, you've been here, you've been with me throughout this journey. So, I want to say thank you for that. And I
Mm.
appreciate you so much for your consistent and continuous support. It really means a lot. And it also says that maybe we ain't doing half bad if people keep showing up and supporting. So I appreciate you for that. I really do. And it's good to finally get the opportunity to really have a more in-depth conversation with you.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to say to the peoples before you tell folks how to find you online and social media?
Yes. So I would say, because I think I said 8 years, because again, time is a social construct for me. So you just said 2019. So 2018 is when I created Mocha Minutes. So how many years is so? See, I'm bad at math. So I think I'm coming up on year 7 and not year 8. I have no problem correcting myself. Hello, retraction. I have no problem. But the other thing is, I actually want to thank you, Talib, because Afros and Audios. I'm gonna try not to cry, but I want to thank you for creating a platform like Afros and Audios where someone who was so new to podcasting did not feel like she did not belong. So I appreciate that. And I continue to tell people, like, come to Afros and Audios, no matter when you started, last week, 10 years ago, you will still feel welcome. And that is literally the point. And that is what community is. And that's what Afros and Audio has always been. It has always been community and including everybody. Oh, you're Black? Come on in. That's it. It was like, that's your only criteria. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate that that is what we saw. Also, I appreciate that your wife made that really good macaroni and cheese, and I got it back on the bus with me and took it home. They're like, "Why are you eating macaroni and cheese out of a cup on the bus?" I'm like, "Because it's that good. Leave me alone."
Nice, nice. Yeah, and I do want to make a correction. Not every Black person. If you're bigoted, we want people there that understand the importance of representing the society in which we live in. So I appreciate the energy that you bring every year and the way that you are. So tell people how they can find you on social
Uh,
media and online.
So you can find the Mocha Minutes podcast, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, same handle, Mocha Minutes. If you would like to follow me personally on Twitter, don't look at my likes, judge your mother. Okay. You can follow me, Sunny Twote that, because I twote what I said and I twote what I twote. But Mocha Minutes, you can find it on basically everywhere you get podcasts. I think RIP is going up SoundCloud, but that also was for rappers and the DJs. So yeah, it won't be on SoundCloud anyway. But you can find Mocha Minutes, same handle. If you like to buy me a coffee, buymeacoffee.com/Mocha Minutes. I won't say I'm everywhere, but yeah, I'm everywhere where you can get podcasts. But yeah, also, if you like to mail me, mochaminutes@gmail.com. I'm accepting emails. There's a guy named Samaj out there who emails me after he listens to my episode. I'm like, oh, we're still listening. I love it.
Speaking of that, is there anything about this year that you are looking forward to with Mocha Minutes? Is there anything that you want to promote or put out there?
So I definitely want to start my Patreon. I think allowing myself to heal instead of saying I'm gonna push all this out. But yeah, starting my Patreon that I said I have wanted to start is one of the things I want to do. And also, I'm thinking about a second podcast that I want to start. And I have been wondering if I want to make it more personal or if it want to be just completely just maybe recaps of reality shows. I'm still weighing that. So, and a second podcast is on my horizon for 2024, but I'm still working through.
It's your prerogative. And that's the
Yeah.
beautiful thing about this medium, any creative art. And I've said it on other episodes that people will hear, but I'll say it again because it needs to be said. Filmmaker doesn't create one film, an author doesn't do one book, a
Mm-hmm.
songwriter doesn't write one song. So there is space and opportunity for you to grow and create more and do whatever you want. We want to definitely get out of a space that has to look one way when it comes to podcasting. This is
Correct.
about innovation, this is about inventiveness, it's about creativity. So create what you want, when you want, how you want.
Mm-hmm.
That's the opportunity here. And so with that, I'm going to close this out. All right? You stay right there for me. I want to give a big thanks to our Afros and Audio and Black Podcasters Association members for supporting our commitment to community and collaboration. If you'd like to join the Black Podcast Association, the link will be in the description. And if you want to join us at the 6th annual Afros and Audio Podcast Festival, visit afrosandaudio.com. Follow at Afros and Audio on all social media channels. And you can find and follow me at Talib Jasir on Instagram. Thanks again, Stephanie, for being part of Afros and Audio's Black History Month interview series. It's been
Thank
great
you
to
for
have you.
having me. Thank you so much. This is amazing.